What does a woman bring to the table in a relationship? This is such an important question and also one that is very divisive. And the reason being is we live in a time historically where we've had this quote unquote empowering movement for women where we've swung so far the pendulum to the side of men have to do everything for us and we deserve all of these things. And if they're not showing up for us in this way, then we don't need them in our lives. Okay, so the pendulum has swung so far in that direction, so much so that women today, good Catholic Christian women, are sitting here thinking, well, I know he has to show up for me in this way, but how do I have to show up for him? What do I actually bring to the table? And this is a topic that is really polarizing because you have people talking about, oh no, like the woman is the crown of creation and the man has to do everything for her. And not in the sense that she's powerless, but because she's worth it. And then we have on the other side of the pendulum, right, the whole independence movement in terms of women being like, I don't need no man, I'm independent, all these things. And so where do we find this mean? And that's what we're going to talk about today. And hello, if we have not met yet, my name is Laura Jean. I am the founder of Let's Be Saints Co., who is sponsoring this video. And I talk all day long about to help women become the leading ladies in their lives so that they are living the way that God intended them to live. And one day, so they can have amazing marriages if that's the call for them. And so this is why I bring this topic up. In fact, this past week in one of my coaching programs, someone brought up this question, and she is in a dating relationship. And she mentioned to me that when her boyfriend brought this up to her, she got really defensive and was like, what do you mean? What do I do for you? And it was almost like this knee-jerk reaction from the culture that we've seen that have gone so far in the direction of, well, a man should show up and do all of these things. And I think that if we're going to step into this conversation, we need to with the right mindset, okay? We can't just walk into this blindly. So the mindset that I'm walking into this conversation with, and that I invite you to walk into this conversation with, is really, what is the goal, right? Let's look at this from the perspective, like the 30,000 foot view. What is the goal here? And then in order to answer that, we have to go back to the beginning. We have to go back to how we were created, because that gives us the blueprint of how to live our lives, especially as men and women figuring this out together. And so we have to have this mindset of both of these things going on. Also the mindset of, if you've never heard this before, when you hear of two extremes, the virtue, what we're all striving for, is oftentimes called the golden mean. What does that mean? It means that, the mean, the median, all those things in math and that we learned when we were little, right? When we have two extremes, oftentimes the virtue is right in the mean, being that it is easy to go to an extreme. It is easy to swing one way or the other. And it all comes back to the original temptation in the garden. Yes, literally. The temptation that we know better and that we can find a better way. We don't have to wait for the Lord to tell us what to do. We can find a better way. It's that pride in our minds that tell us, actually, no, it's easier to go to this extreme because I have some say in it. I have some I know we should be doing this, but I feel like this is an easier way. And it's also from a lot of wounds, right? There is a lot of history that we have seen that have made people swing one way or the other, whether it be personal experience, which is why a lot of people swing to the independence route of I don't need no man. It's really that I find is really found in personal experience. They've been hurt, they've been let down, they've proven to themselves that they're the only ones that they can count on. And so, in a way, it's easier to not try and to build up those walls and to continue on in that direction. And in the other side, we have seen that historically, men have not always treated women well. And so we see that there is a push for them to honor us, for them to see how amazing we are, and to dote on us in a way, to show up in the way that they were designed to show up. And so these are kind of the two extremes that we find ourselves really navigating. And it can almost catch people off guard, like it did this woman that I was talking to kind of be asked a question of, well, what are you doing for me? Like, what does this look like in a relationship? And to have kind of that knee-jerk reaction of like, you're not supposed to ask me that. What do you mean? What do you mean you should be providing all these things? So I want us to take a closer look at not so much why, because we just talked a little bit about that, why we're feeling these two extremes, but let's look a little bit closer to what does that golden mean look like? What are the things that women are bringing to relationships? And how, as leading ladies of our own lives, can we step into that and be practicing that whether or not we're in a relationship yet? Okay, you with me? Amazing. So we're going to get a little bit in the weeds here in terms of we have to learn a few things in order to have the answer that we are going to get to. We have to be raising our piggy bank of knowledge. Okay. So complementarity. Complementarity. What does this word mean? We know that going back to the beginning, learning from our creation, that men and women are complementary. We are one nature, two bodies, embodied as male and female, and we're called to be united to each other. And so there needs to be this complementarity, and there is a complementarity between our physical bodies, and there also is a complementarity between our souls and our natures and the way that our brains work. We can see this through studies in psychology, in biology. There are differences between men and women that allow us to think differently, feel differently, be propelled by different things. And so when we take a look at that, we see that they were all made to be complementary. So when you have a woman on her own and a man on his own, there are things that are like, yeah, we can kind of make do, but there's something that if it were to fit here would really help blossom. That is why, it's all makes sense. The complementarity between men and women, we could talk about all day. There's so many ways that this comes into play. For example, when we're talking about attraction, when we're talking about the thing that pulls a man and a woman together, the man is typically more naturally inclined to look for the physical in like the first kind of throw of attraction. He notices the physical first because as a man, he's driven by physical, he's driven by that sort of thing. And so that is going to be kind of the first thing that catches his eye. Now, a woman is going to be more attracted to someone who is emotionally intelligent, who can connect with her emotionally, more with the personality, because, and it's really, really interesting, because when you are thinking about spending your life with one another and figuring out if you guys are the right couple, both of these need to be in alignment. And so you have the man looking for one and the woman looking for the other, and together they figure out, are we a match? Should we continue to get to know each other? And it's not 100% at all. It is definitely a mixture, but it's helpful to know what drives a man versus what drives a woman and how that's all complementary. Another layer deeper. Okay, a woman we know is really driven by the man seeing her emotional needs, listening when she's just yapping about her day, right? She wants him to be there for her, and not only in the like, let's solve the problem, but like, I want to be seen, I want to be admired by you. And the man is really needs his hard work to be acknowledged. He needs her to acknowledge the effort that he's putting in, to thank him for the things that he is doing, to recognize the ways that he's providing. And so when you look at these two things, right, I've heard this advice in so many different ways, but if you want a happy marriage, if you want a happy relationship, women, you've got to acknowledge what your man is doing. You have to praise him for it. And men, you have to see your woman. Spend time, even if it doesn't make sense to you, admire her and really be there for her in those ways. And it's so interesting because these things are so complementary, but we have to see how they are also different. Because the beauty lies in the difference, doesn't it? I mean, we can take that principle and look at that in anything. The beauty in our uniqueness as human beings lies in that we're all unique, that we're all different. The way that I am is not the way that you are, and the way that you are is not the way that your neighbor is. And that is what makes us beautiful and unique and different. And that is what we want to think about when we think about men and women, and how it's not all one or the other, and how these things, we're all different, and yet we can learn about the most basic of biological differences and psychological differences between men and women to enable us to really figure out this complementarity and to live in the way that it really is a dance, that it's really a beautiful back and forth, because that's what that's what reciprocal love is. It's a back and a forth. It's a back and a forth. If you think about this kind of ebb and flow is everywhere in nature. Yeah, think of the ocean, think of the moon, pulling the tides in, pushing the tides out. It is also in humans, right? One goes in, the other goes in, and that's why another way that this complementary kind of comes about between men and women is the way that we love. Men are the drivers in the sense, they are the pursuers. They kind of have the first kind of lunge, and then the women are very receptive. But this receptivity is not passive. Okay, this is a really important point. The receptivity of a woman is not passive. This receptive love is active in so far as she accepts the love of the other and also responds to it by loving the other in her way. And so it is not only a receptive, okay, and it stays here, but that it's reciprocal, that she then loves him. And this is how this ebb and the flow. This is everywhere, like I said, in nature. This is also how the Trinity is. God the Father loves the Son. God the Son loves the Father. And through their mutual love comes forth the Holy Spirit, the third person of the Trinity. This is everywhere, like I said, in nature, in human beings, as we're made in the image and likeness of God. And that means imaging the Trinity and how we love and how this comes about. Yeah, so are we following? Okay, so the other thing that women typically are talked about in terms of like what their role is, right? We've talked about receptivity and how that's kind of a buzzword and how that can be misconstrued as passive. Okay, it's not passive. But the other thing is nurturing. Okay, so when we think about the men's role, we're not denying that they are the pursuers, that they are the providers, that they are strong, that they are stepping up in lots of different areas, right? That they are just showering love and admiration on the woman. That is not wrong. We are not saying that is wrong. But we as women have to figure out, okay, but what does the things that I'm called to, the ways that I was created, how does that then impact him, and how can I love him through that? And one of those things are our nurturing nature. Nurturing, again, is not passive in any way. It's very active, but it's a little bit more quiet. It kind of manifests in the way of nurturing one's mind, nurturing, like, or do they feel at home in this relationship? Nurturing the home in and of itself. Is it a safe place to come back to? Is it some place we want to, be able to relax and kind of have this space to recharge and then go back out into the world? Is this nurturing a way that she is allowing the man to fulfill all the things that he has to do, to be the provider, to be the strong one, right? It's more of a quiet work, but it is so important, because without the foundation of that, without that safe place to come home to, that safe person to fall back on, there is a lot harder of a time for a man to go out and have the same outputs that he wants to have without that foundation. If you think about a building, right? An architect plans out his sketches and his blueprint, and he knows that a building will not last if the foundation is not strong. So when the construction workers take over the project and they build that foundation, they have to make sure that that is solid before they can build on top. This is why I've actually read studies where men who are married and men who are married with a child actually do significantly better in grad school. They finish quicker, they're more at the top of their class than their unmarried counterparts. And you would think like, oh, well, that distraction either in their career or in school, for example, would distract them because their time is now stretched in different places. But the reality is that is from the nurturing nature of the woman. Because with that strong foundation under him, the man can go out and give his all in all the areas of his life because he knows he's being taken care of. Does this make sense? Are we following? Okay, so if we were to look at this more practically, we've talked about the mindset, we've talked a little bit about the knowledge that we have to learn to kind of get to this place. And now I want to kind of not change the topic, but really transition into a more practical conversation so that we know, like, okay, I can think about doing this and I can think about doing that, and this is how I can live it out. Because it's really important to have the mindset, really important to have the knowledge, and then the next very important part is to live it out. Yes? Okay. So we're going to talk about this. And one of the things that I recently in Mass we heard the gospel was from Matthew 5, and the last bit of it was a long gospel, but the last section of it, Matthew 5:37, said, "Let your yes mean yes and your no mean no." Ladies, come here really quickly, okay? A leading lady knows her mind, okay? And she knows to have her yes mean yes and her no mean no. This waffling back and forth, it can feel really good to lean into it, to lean into the overthinking, to lean into all of these things. But our minds are actually a place where we are called to have this possession over ourselves, to have this self-mastery, so that we can have our yes mean yes and our no mean no. What this looks like in the context of a relationship is that if you are in a relationship where you're still figuring it out, having your yes mean yes in terms of this is a green light until it's not. Okay, really important. Not waffling back and forth. I don't know, is this a good thing or whatnot, right? Having this self-mastery over ourselves includes over this mind. A leading lady knows her mind, and she lets her yes mean yes and her no mean no. That's really important, including in, even if you're not in the stage of your relationship where you're figuring out, do I continue to see them or do I not? In one's life, it's really important, because when you're building a household or you're building this home for your relationship and for your family, it's really important that your commitments outside or your commitments within the family have these clear boundaries. And these clear boundaries come to light when you are having your yes mean yes and your no mean no. If you are not going to take on anything else that season, your no needs to mean no. If you are, going to spend more time on your relationship and working on these things, let your yes mean yes, which means you have to follow through on those things. Okay, are we following? It's really important. That was Matthew 5:37. All right, second thing, emotional intelligence. Again, like I said, ladies, we have to have possession over our mind. We have to be working on our emotional intelligence. If feelings feel scary, if feelings feel like they are threatening us, please do the work to unravel the wound behind that. Feelings are good, emotions are good, they happen to us, and we get to decide how we respond to them, not react. And so when we are working on this, ladies, let me tell you, we are working on this, we are not only supporting ourselves, we are not only working on becoming the best women we can be, but we are helping our partner, whether we know him today or we will meet him in the future. We are helping that relationship be so much stronger when we focus on our emotional intelligence. It's really important. Self-possession, we've already talked about that a little bit, but that's self-mastery. And there's this great quote, I think it's by St. Edith Stein, and she says, you cannot first, you cannot give of yourself if you do not first possess yourself fully, which means if you don't have control over your desires and your emotions and all of those things, how can you fully give yourself to someone else? So that's really important to work on, that self-possession. Now, again, we want to talk about the difference between reception being our receptive nature being passive versus active. So think about that. Think about how we can make that receptivity active and how we can be aware of that so that we don't fall into ever letting it be passive. Admiration, like I said, acknowledge what they're doing, thank them, be their champion. Okay, be their champion, really important. Work on becoming a home, really making that peace, whether that be in you, in your relationship, to have that foundation of peace. He can come to you, you can come to him, but where we have the possession over our emotions enough where it's not between you that the friction is, but you can talk about friction in your own lives. Yeah, that's a big difference, and maybe we can talk about that at some point. But having this idea of home being that safe place for you both to rest and recharge and go back out and do the things that you both are uniquely called to do. Okay. The last thing I want to talk about is this quote from Fulton Sheen, and you may have heard of it already, but it's really fantastic. And the reason is because it kind of I love it because it really takes this side of the extreme of, well, the man has to stand up and do everything for the woman, and this golden mean that we're talking about. And it really talks about the benefits of having this, idea in our minds, although we know it's not it. It talks about the benefit of that, but really what it's talking about is this golden mean. And so this is why I love it. This is what the quote from Fulton Sheen is. And it says, to a great extent, the level of any civilization is the level of its womanhood. When a man loves a woman, he has to become worthy of her. The higher her virtue, the more noble her character, the more devoted she is to truth, justice, goodness. The man has to aspire to be worthy of her. The history of civilization could actually be written in terms of the level of its women. Ladies, we have so much power. And yes, there's a lot of ways that we have so much power. But truly, I love this quote for so many reasons, because to the great extent of the level of any civilization is the level of its womanhood. So first of all, it's acknowledging women as important. Second of all, it's giving us a call. It's giving us a call to arms to be like, we are not going to be bums. We are not going to sit on our couches and wait for our man to show up at our door and to do everything for us. No, ma'am. We are focusing on ourselves. We are focusing on how to be the best woman we can be, how to be the leading ladies of our lives, because the higher her virtue, the more noble her character, the more devoted she is to truth, justice, goodness, the more a man has to aspire to be worthy of her. So it's not just a man has to aspire to be worthy of her, but she's sitting on her couch and doing nothing. It is in our pursuit of truth, goodness, and justice. It's in our pursuit of becoming the best we can be that the man has to reach us there. That it is not inactive in our end. We're not sitting and waiting for this man to come along in the sense that we're sitting and waiting and doing nothing. We might be in a time of waiting for this man to come along, but it's an active waiting. We have to be out doing things. That's why we have to be the leading ladies of our own lives. Amen? It's so important. And I forgot to say this earlier, but this video, this episode is sponsored by the Bridesmaid to Bride Challenge by Let's Be Saints Co. It is really these 3 days where we are learning about just this, about how to become that leading lady in our lives. Because we can see it as like, I agree, it's a great idea, but 3 days to really actually sit down and look at, what does that mean? What are the beliefs in my way? What is stopping me from doing this? And how can I actually take the steps today to become the leading lady in my life? To be that person who is either positioning herself as more attractive to the man who is aspiring to be worthy of her, or to be the woman that she was always created to be. And these don't have to be an either or. They are in fact the same. And so that's why it's really important to be investing in ourselves in this way. If you find that this is important, if you're finding that you're being a little bit challenged, or your mind is being like opened up in a new direction in this video, or if you're listening on podcast, that maybe take this as a sign that this challenge is for you. Encourage you to check it out. The link will be in the description of this video or in the show notes in the podcast. But I just want to, again, leave you with this idea that as women, we have quieter roles, okay? And oftentimes they can be misconstrued as passive roles, but they are not passive. They are very, very active. And the quicker we realize that, and the quicker that we develop in our self-development to the point where we are focusing on that, that is where this magic happens. Because we are on our way. We are working on ourselves until the man comes along. And when he does come along, we get to honor him and love him in these active ways as well. It's really important. So remember, women, our roles may not be as loud as the man's, but they are still very, very active. I'm cheering for you.